So next up we've got Vinny Bevavino. His company is Seed and Cycle, and he's been an incredible resource for a lot of folks in Baltimore, building hoop houses, helping with farm planning, compost planning, and really up and down the East Coast. So we're lucky to have him in Baltimore as of just a few months ago, and we hope you'll enjoy what he has to share. Thanks.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me, Maya. Thanks for having me, CivicWorks, and Millsweet Farm, and everybody here. Thanks for your attention for the next 5 or so minutes, or 10 minutes. My name is Vinny. I have a company. It's called Seed and Cycle. It's a consulting or construction company. I'm sorry, I'm away. That helps. I designed this company to help myself about 5 or 6 years ago. When I was farming on about a ½ acre of land, and I built my first hoop house, and I was starting dabbling in composting and setting up things like drip irrigation or crop planning and marketing and things like that, and didn't know what the heck I was doing, and really just making it up as I went, and oftentimes made expensive and both financially and time expensive errors, and we're doing things just kind of poorly, and learn them by going to other farms and talking to other farmers and making those errors. And about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I thought to myself, well, I wanted to start to help other people get through these types of issues, get through these types of problems by helping them build infrastructure on farms, on small farms, urban farms, as well as focusing on composting and developing really smart and effective ways to compost on these small farms. So I started this company called Seed and Cycle, and I'm here going to talk to you today about how to grow food nearly anywhere or everywhere, and how when we're looking for land inside cities, we often don't have the luxury of having a perfect farmland. So this morning I was actually helping my friend up in like 30 miles north of here in a very idyllic, nice soil, nice trees and birds, things like that, putting in a drip irrigation system. He's farming up there on 4 acres. And I thought to myself, wow, this is like a really nice place to be. And we don't have the luxuries in the city of having 4 acres of soft soil that's been tilled for 100 years maybe, and we often have to create new farmland ourselves. So this is a little presentation about how we're doing that in Baltimore and how you can do that in Baltimore and elsewhere. So the first thing that we want to talk about is how to come up with new farm techniques. We got to throw away what we think farming looks like, or what my friend up in the county is doing in our head. And we have to think of farming in an entirely new way. We have to get very, very creative and make a lot of mistakes, and we have to try a lot of things, and we're going to find some new, whether productive techniques to grow a lot of food or profitable techniques if you're trying to grow some money out of this, if you're trying to do this in an entrepreneurial point of view. So I hope that this will help you kind of think about those new techniques. We want to talk about how to do this both safely from a food safety or a toxicology point of view, and also how to do it productively, because there's no good doing all this and not getting a good yield out of it. And the third is how I really enjoy building things, and I build a lot of greenhouses and hoop houses, and I'm just going to show a lot of photographs about how I do that on real compact land, how to do that on asphalt, how to do that everywhere, and how you could do that literally everywhere. So,
Please, could you just hit the lights right by your right shoulder for note takers?
Yeah, sure. So, this is going to be the last slide that has words on it, if I can remember correctly. So, let's develop new techniques. So first of all, we're going to have to maybe focus in on a narrower slice of our crop selection, particularly ones that have shallower roots, because we don't have the ability for our plants to go down really deep in marginal land. So if you're going to be bringing in soil, you could have the choice of buying and bringing in 6 inches of soil, or buying and bringing in 18 inches or 24 inches of soil. I'd rather do 6 inches, and therefore I'm not going to be able to grow the very deep-rooted crops. So immediately that probably is going to be eliminating all perennial crops, like trees or berries or bushes or asparagus or things like that. And that's also probably going to be eliminating most fruiting crops if you're going to be growing on very bad land and you're bringing in new soil. So that The good news though is that you can be growing very successfully salad greens, head lettuce, spinach, beans, crops like that. And root crops is as long as those roots have enough space. So radishes, beets, turnips, those types of things. Other types of, we also have to think of like kind of new businesses or new business models, or I'm thinking very entrepreneurially. Let me just stop right now. How many people are thinking about growing food in an entrepreneurial point of view? Okay, cool. As opposed to people who love gardening and trying to scale up gardening from a hobby point of view. Cool. So I'm thinking about, I'm going to be speaking from an entrepreneurial point of view, but those of you who raised your hand in the second round, just try to translate what I'm saying into your hobbies. But a lot of things that you can be doing, instead of farming and growing cut vegetables for restaurants and farmers market, which is what we think farming looks like, let's grow seedlings or potted plants or things like that. Because there you can do that right on asphalt. You can do that right on contaminated soil. You could do that you could be moving. You could have a movable farm that if you can get a lease for a year, start going at it. And then you can move in a year if you have to. So that covers it. Another one is microgreens. We heard from the man from Spin Farming about shoots and about how much of a wonderful, profitable boon that has been for his farm. So looking at other types of crops like microgreens and salad shoots and things like that that you can grow not in the ground but on benches and things like that. And there are people right now in Baltimore City that are quitting their jobs because they're growing enough microgreens to pay their rent and pay their mortgage and have their wife go to school. So you can do it too. The other crops, mushrooms. If you have a garage, you don't even have access to sunlight. You can still be growing things. So there are certain things that you can grow without sunlight. Mushrooms are one of them because they're not photosynthetic. And the second thing, I'm going to jump down, composting and also worm composting. Two very in-demand products that you could do in your garage right now, or you could rent a garage or a small warehouse or a huge warehouse and do it at a number of different scales. And then, hydroponics or aquaponics, and I kind of wanted to do this as a precursor to Dave's presentation, but obviously that can be done on an abandoned gas station, a Superfund site, a warehouse with lighting. You can have the tanks outside, have the fish inside. This could be done in your basement with the fish out in your backyard. Get creative. Okay. Sorry, one more slide. Hate them. Okay, so to be safe and productive, first of all, don't assume that when you have soil that you can even put your shovel in, that it's safe to grow in. And you probably heard this before, and you might not do it, but please test your soil and look not just for NPK, but look for lead and any other of those heavy metals. Don't really even worry about the macro and micronutrients because you can always bring that in through compost and other things like that. But if you have lead or cadmium or any of those other dangerous metals, that's going to be a problem, and you're going to want to, that doesn't mean the game's over, but that means that you're going to have to think about how you can get around that problem. That's either by growing in pots on benches or by bringing in soil and putting it on a barrier, and I'm going to show you pictures of that later. So cap contaminated soil, if it is that contaminated and you can't amend it or can't remediate it, putting down a barrier, whether it's plastic or rubber or something like that, not burlap or cardboard, right? So things, if there's toxic stuff below cardboard or burlap or things like that, are not going to cut it. We've got to prevent our roots and things like that from getting into that contaminated soil. Then you bring in new soil, and that depends on your budget. If you have no or little budget for new soil, then start with seedlings and microgreens and things like that, because you're going to buy 1 or 2 or 3 cubic yards of compost a year. If you have a larger budget, and you can, build a hoop house and put 6 or 8 or 10 inches of soil down there, and that's going to cost $1,000 or so, and that's a great way to get going. So last is site drainage. If you are farming on impermeable surfaces or near impermeable surfaces, where when you have a heavy rain like we did a couple days ago, your soil doesn't just wash away or your crops don't wash away. You want to think about the slope or the grade of your property. And if you have a nice soft soil where water permeates, you don't really have to worry about this very much. But if you don't, you want to be it would be ideal to be farming on a slight slope, so the water is sheeting off of your property. And you want to put berms and other things like that above your crops so that it's directing stormwater away from your crops and off your property. And you want to look at what's above your property. So if you've done your tests and you're confident about where you're standing, look upstream or uphill or whatever that is, upgrade, because there could be contamination or just things that you don't want washing down on your fields. So look for divots in your land. That's going to be wet spots that are just going to be puddles and it's not going to seep through. Things like that. I like a nice slight grade. Okay, there we go. So this was a hoop house that I built in Brooklyn at a high school, and we arrived at this hoop house, or this site that it was going to be built at, and you can see what I was coming up against. It looked great. They got broccoli, kale, they've got all these like beds, the soil looked nice and dark, because they've been farming this for I think 2 years now, and they were looking to build a 20 by 48 foot hoop house. I got my next slide hammer out and thought we could get it in, and this is me on the left and my friend on the right, and we're hitting them in. And just like most other vacant properties that you're going to find in the city, even if it looks like it's a nice farmland above ground, 6 or 8 or 12 inches below is going to be rubble. And we were hitting concrete, we hit a toilet, we hit other things in there. So it was we muscled through it and we got the stakes in the ground and we put the hoop house up, but that was that. This is another seemingly safe vacant lot in West Baltimore that I just built a hoop house in. And it looks nice, right? It's nice green grass, it's beautiful. It's on, that's Fulton Ave that picture was taken on. We were hitting them in and just hitting, it was, when you tear down a house, when the city tears down a house in the city and it becomes a vacant land, they grade it and they put maybe a thin layer of topsoil on it at best. And then below that is just bricks and rubble and things like that. So be advised when you're going to be looking at that. What we did for that is we put a jackhammer on top of our ground stakes and hit them in. And it worked. It was great. This is a hoop house that I built right up the street on 4500 Hartford Road. It's where the Tuesday Market is in Laurelville. That's a gas station. I kind of wish I didn't have the photograph that way, and I wish it was that way, because just to the left is the old gas station building. So the farmer of this brought in a lot of soil, and again we ran into the same problem. Even though we weren't building it on concrete, we brought in an air hammer or a pneumatic hammer or things like that. So you can go to Sunbelt or United Rentals or anything like that and rent these machines, and they're going to make your life a lot easier if you're trying to farm on some marginal land. This is an air-powered tool as opposed to the other one, which was electric-powered, that hammers in. It's exactly like a jackhammer, except instead of a chisel, it's got a flat face that it just hits the hammer, and it just goes in really, really nicely. So I would suggest when you're looking at land, don't rule things out. There's ways to get around it. Okay, so this is a hoop house that I built, 2 of them actually, on Asquith, which is down to North Avenue. Make a right and then make a left on Asquith. It's right there. You can see them from the street on asphalt. And we had to drill through the asphalt to get to be able to hit the hammer, to hit the ground stakes in. So this is a good picture because it shows a couple different things. First of all, it's a hoop house on asphalt, which is great. Second, it shows this plastic liner. We didn't, and this is down. You would expect this is a parking lot. It was down. It was graded down to the road, so the water would fall in the parking lot and go down into the road. Water was coming up where the photographer was standing and flowing down to the street. So we wanted to prevent that water from getting into that hoop house. So we basically built a bathtub of sorts and put our soil in that bathtub of plastic. We then cut holes on the low ends so that when you watered the greenhouse, this bathtub wasn't going to fill. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Growing on a slight grade and preventing running water. So what we did here is, this is a hammer drill. We realized later on that a rotary hammer is the right tool to use. It's a drill that hammers as you go, and there's different bits for different types of material that you're drilling through. So you get these like diamond core bits that cost $60 or $80 a piece. And you drill through, and then you can hammer. Typically, when you have a parking lot, there's about 8 or 10 inches of asphalt and other junk like that. And after you get through, it's pretty compacted, but soil nonetheless. So we were able to hit the ground stakes in. And you can see there's ground stakes going into asphalt. And you can see the soil up above. And here we had trimmed the plastic, but you can still barely kind of see the plastic bathtub that we created. Next. So here's another hoop house that in a farm that I actually used to work at, but don't anymore, called Eco City Farms, which I would highly suggest looking into and suggest checking out. This is a hoop house that they just built this past spring on a tennis court. Same kind of story. This was a hoop house that they were given everything. They were given the hoops and they had to figure out everything else. So they bought ground stakes and put them into the ground similar to the way that I showed you before. Again, with a power tool, a drill that was able to get that through. And they used both a power drill and a pneumatic hammer to hammer that stuff in. Another shot. This is the reason why I wanted to show you this is that this square right here, it's a 100-foot by 100-foot square that they're going to be just putting soil on top of and growing. And they're going to be building basically one large raised bed with, if I could quick do the math, it's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 150 cubic yards of soil probably that they'd have to bring in. So it's costly, but it's possible. Whenever you're growing in a finite amount of soil, whether that's on asphalt or even a hanging pot or a tray or a little seedling cell, I want you to be very cognizant of water. Things dry out a lot quicker. So your automatic drip irrigation systems will pay for themselves very quickly. And second, fertilizer. Because there's a finite amount of soil, even if that soil is very fertile, you're going to run out of fertilizer or run out of nutrients in that soil. So having a nutrient plan that you're putting down some fertilizer when you're planting and things like that would be helpful and are more important than when you're just growing in an open field. Here, last picture of this, they painted they're not going to put soil on the ground in this hoop house. They're growing shoots because they make so much money, and they're going to make worm castings because they make so much money. This is like they're going to be their little economic engine of sorts. They painted the ground white for sun and for heat, so that in the summertime it's not going to be so hot in there. I think the jury's a little bit out because in the wintertime I would like to see that painted black again. So I don't know. But you can manipulate the color of your ground. Finally, and this was kind of my transition to Dave, is that this is a group that I work with in Reading, Pennsylvania, called Permacultivate, and lo and behold, so they had a greenhouse with asphalt that was an abandoned city greenhouse that they resurrected or revamped or whatever, and they're building pretty large aquaponic systems in it, raft systems similar to what we just saw. So that's another way that this group of people got around the whole how do we get into the ground thing, is if they don't go in the ground, they grow up. Which is a great transition. So, if you have any questions, let me know. That's the website, that's my email address. I'm a friendly guy, I'll answer anything you have coming at me. Yeah, and I'm going to be around, obviously, for the panel afterwards. Cool.
Thank you, Vinny.